I pull all my handles off the mug. And one of the tricks is to have it be the right amount of dryness. If you squeeze the rim just a little bit, it has a little bit of give, but it resists. And so if it's too easy, if it's like flopping, like this one's really soft, so it's like easy to do that.
Don't you worry about it deforming when you do that?
Well, I mean,
It's an always
I'm not going for the perfectly round, so. But you can test it. I mean, I'm demonstrating with more pinching than I would necessarily do. But that amount of give is good because you want it soft enough that the handle's not going to crack off, but hard enough that when you're pulling, it's not going to oval. Because that's one reason the handle will come off while you're pulling it, is if the pot starts to open. So I usually wedge up a big old thing of clay and then cut off a carrot. I pull lugs and then attach them and then pull them off the mug. You could definitely make a coil lug instead, if that's easier. I just find this to be quicker, so I can pull a lot of them really quickly. I like to work on a painted board so that it doesn't absorb, like just when I'm doing the handles, so that it doesn't absorb the moisture and dry them out too much. I find that it's worth putting some extra time into making a good carrot to pull from. I want it big enough I can get some good handles, good amount of handles, but small enough that this is probably on the smaller side of what I would do, but your arm gets tired, so if you have a big old thing, you have to hold it up. And I want to make sure the bottom's not too flimsy and thin, and that it's relatively even. If you have some big lumps in it, it's just going to make it harder to not pull chunks off or stretch it the wrong way or something. I'll be stretching this more than I recommend you stretch it, or unless you have a lot of practice with it. It's easy to go too fast and get it to do that. And so it's one of those things that whenever I'm in a hurry, I pull too hard and then have to start over and over again, and it takes twice as long. And so I want it to be tapering both directions, and I want it to be rather wide. I like my handles to have a good width to them. So this isn't round, it's more like a eye-shaped oval. And to stretch it thinner without making it narrower, I'll pinch it this way between these two fingers, and I can kind of make it flat. And then once I have a good amount of working clay here, I'll start pulling them off the tip. And so I'm just gonna do that to get a little taper. Do that, and I'll stretch down a little bit and then work that. And so I'll usually pull 10 to 15 at a time, and then I'll put those on, and then I'll go back and pull more.
So Francis makes a lot of work at one time, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah. How much pressure are you using? That's the part that I have trouble with, the pressure.
Yeah, you want just enough pressure that it's gonna move a little bit.
Okay.
And then you can work up from there. So this is kind of a bad, if you start getting a lump on the bottom, just take it off, because that'll get you into trouble. So if I'm pulling on it and it's not moving at all, obviously that's not enough. But it's worth having it just barely move at all, like this, and just doing a bunch of repetitions, and then you can start slowly, building pressure and pulling faster. It's better to have a full motion to start at the top. Holding it directly in front of your forehead is really the way to do it. Not, you know, like your arm will get tired, but you'll pull way better handles if it's like slightly above eye level. If this is angled at all, that makes it almost impossible to get a good handle off of it. And so with these, I'm mostly looking for the size of the top of them and the amount of clay. So one could be shorter and wider, and I'm not going for perfect uniformity on the handles like I'm not with the pieces. But even if I was, at this point, what I'm looking for is like the size of the top joint. So I'll lay this carrot down here and slide it up until the top looks like the same size, and cut it off. And then I'll put this in plastic until the next batch. And so these could just as easily be rolled out from old coil and squashed flat or something. There's no need for this to be pulled except for the speed. And then from here, I'm going to pick a mug that I want to put a handle on. And then I'll pick a piece of clay. And I kind of want to tuck the sharp edges inward on both ends. And then make both ends a little wider. As you can see on most of my handles, there's like a fat top and a fat bottom with the handle stretched in between. And then for these style, I'm making the handles triangular this way. Just because I thought it looked kind of cool and kind of fits with the rim, the way I'm making the rims on the pots. And so I'll just shape this as much as I need to until I'm happy with it. But the main thing is I want to have both ends a little bit wider than the middle. And the top part, I like to have it be quite large. One of the things that's really easy when you're pulling handle off the cup is to pinch it right up here at the top to have it start to kink a little bit and get a little bit thin there. And once it's thinner close to the joint, then lower down, there's no way to kind of salvage it. It's always going to look a little bit haphazard and hang a little bit haphazard. And so just starting with extra clay up there allows me to pinch it a little bit as I put it on and not get myself into trouble. So I want to like pick the side of the pot that I like, both for the curve of where the handle will go and also like with these I have the little throwing lines and I want to have a nice front. And then this is the great kind of scoring tool that has a bunch of teeth, except the teeth have all fallen out and I only have 2 left.
Aww.
I need to get another one. So normally I just dip this in magic water. For porcelain I always use magic water. There's some up there. But I'll put a little bit on with a brush because my tool is losing its teeth. One of the things you want to be careful for is putting too much liquid on. And that's one reason why dipping it and putting it on this way just controls for that. Like now that that's scratched up, I would not go put extra. So another reason why a handle will come off your cup as you're pulling is it's either too wet or too dry. And so you have to get right in the middle. The other thing I'm doing as I'm scoring here is I'm making the score mark bigger than the end of the handle, and I'm not worrying about scoring off, you know, whatever onto the cup. If I try and keep it like smaller than that, it's going to be, I don't know, the handle always takes up more room than you think, and it's easy to cover up those lines. That's another thing that's really nice about scoring with this tool as opposed to a normal needle tool, is the scratch marks are smaller, and then you don't have a big groove that is hard to smooth out later. On the handle, I'll get just a little bit of water, magic water, and rub it till it starts to get a little sticky, and that's the right amount of water. And then I'll score this, and then I leave exposed seams around the handles. So instead of blending them in, and so I want to go in and touch up this edge to make it rounded, so that as I smash it into the pot, I get a nice sort of silhouette of the joint. So if you're leaving exposed seams, you want to set it up at this point. And then, as I'm putting it on, I want to wiggle it a fair amount. If you can get that motion, that's really going to get it stuck on in a way that just pushing won't. And I'm trying to think of ways that I can pinch this that will accentuate the shape. So I'll come along the spine here and push in, because that's okay to be pinched that direction. And I'll push flat in here because I have a flat edge there. I used to have a style handle that had a little divot here, and I would use that to like pinch and push in. So if you can set up, your design to have places you can touch it, that'll help. And then sometimes I leave the scoring. Depending on what glaze you're using, it'll fill a lot of these little lines in. You'll never see it. If you do want to clean it up, it's easier to do it now than after you've pulled the handle. And you can do it with this same brush. This is sort of a stiff, bristled paintbrush that's terrible for painting, but it works really well for this. And the other thing this can do is like if you push your handle on and there's a little bit of water or slip that squishes out, that's usually too much moisture, and so doing this with a brush will take some of that off. Or if there's a little bit of a dry point on the corner where you didn't score and the handle's bigger than you thought it was going to be, this will help get a little bit of water in there. And you just want to be careful that you don't flood it, and then you do enough repetitions till it kind of gets gooey in there, I guess. And then this is ready to pull, and that's like a pretty strong joint, so you can do a fair amount of pressure on this, and it's not going to come off the mug. You want to get the whole thing really nice and wet, and then I'll spend a little time smoothing the top here, right where it joins the cup, while it's still nice and sturdy. I can already tell this handle is going to be a little bit too much clay for this cup. Maybe I'll try and cut a little off. Not ideal, but
Why would you cut that off after you pulled it?
I want the bottom to be kind of a natural rounded shape, and it's hard to get the edges back if you cut it right at the end. That's why, like here, I'm softening it a bit. Largely because of the style of the cup that I'm putting these on. That's part of why I'm having them be kind of triangular shaped. And I like if there's a little lumpy on the bottom, as I stretch it out, that will mimic some of the curves of the piece. So for a different style handle, I would cut it at that. And then this is just the same thing, just pulling. Because I have it wider at the bottom, now I'm not pulling off the end fully. I'm slowly working out the middle. Maybe I'm sliding off the end a little bit, but not. It'll be easy to catch on that and stretch it. And I can work my way right up to the top and get all the unevenness out. I'm trying to keep this flat side flat and the sharp side sharp. And I want to be careful. It has a tendency to get a little bit narrow there, so I'm trying to keep it flat. And as I'm doing like a batch, I'll start to get a sense for how much clay each handle should be for the size that I need it. And I'll start measuring them down my hand so that I get a sense for how long the handle for each cup is, so that I don't have to use a ruler or like keep, you can test it, but is going to get a little weaker each time. So if you get it within the ballpark first. Another aesthetic that I really like is it being widest at the top, then narrowest just below, and then slowly tapering back out. So once I have it about the length that I want, it's usually pretty tacky at the bottom, and I can just set it on the mug like that while I kind of figure out the final positioning. If you want it straight up and down, this is a good time to look at it. I tend to offset mine a little bit now. And then with stoneware, I don't bother. I'll like rub a little slip or a little like water there. I'm not using slip, and you definitely can make some slip out of magic water. I find with these scratchers, especially when they're fully functional, you can kind of make a little slip just on the surface there, and that tends to be enough for me. And then right at this stage, I want to make sure that the bottom is joined, but I don't want to lay it onto the cup too much because it'll stick really easily, and if it sticks up high, too far, it looks really bad. And so I'm going to stick my finger underneath it as I push it in so that I can stick just the bottom of it. So I'm putting my finger into here and pushing there. And I have a little like S shape going, which I like. And then here I'm just trying to find ways to push it in that fit with the shape that I'm making. So I can push along this side because it's narrow and I want it scooping in. And I can push in from the edge here a little bit and then push down. And so I'm just slowly working this in. If I just push into it, you'll see a mark and it'll get kind of kinked there at the bottom. I'll push in from the base here to create another angle. And I'm just sort of gently sculpting. All these motions, I'm doing the same type of thing as when you're pulling. If I want to push it down here, I'll do it with like 5 or 6 little motions very lightly. And that way it keeps the stretched feel as you're attaching it. And then at this stage, I want to arc it out a little bit, and I want to round the inside of the part you're going to be gripping. And so your fingers feel most comfortable when they're going around something sort of rounded. And if you're grabbing, and I mean, besides the fact that this is a knife, the flatness of it is uncomfortable. Whereas this will be much nicer. And so I'm just gonna coax the inside to be round there, where your fingers are gonna grip it. And then similarly, this part is where your outside finger is pushing. You want slightly curved to the other direction. If it's curved out and the edges are pushing into your finger, that's uncomfortable when it's heavy, especially. And so I'll be softening these edges to make a nice place for that finger to push in, and then alternating a bit back and forth. And then here I can pull it up a little bit if it's sagging. And then I want to lastly sort of look at the negative space and this curve coming up and around. I'll like play with this to make sure it goes straight into the pot with the same arc. I don't want it to like bend in S or something, unless I do want that, but I want to be aware of that, I guess. And then I can clean up down here with this if I wanted to. And that's it.
All right.